good afternoon. Hello, Angelo. How are you doing today?
Hi, Pierre. I'm doing well. Obviously, locked down, not going anywhere, but all good otherwise.
That's how it is. That's how it is. I'm really excited for the podcast today, Angelo. It's a topic that is close to my heart. I've been kind of following on a let's say a layman level for quite a number of years. Topic is the future of AI in iGaming. And to start things off, Angelo, I mean, you are a bit of an AI guru, I would say, here in Malta and internationally as well. Can you start by introducing yourself and what you do and things like that?
Yes. I'm Angelo Dalli. I've been an AI expert for the last 20 years or so. Had a degree in AI and then eventually continued on until I did my PhD in it. And then, took a little bit of a route through entrepreneurship, set up a few companies, including startups and companies that went to be very successful in the gaming industry and also in other industries, including transportation and others. So I've had a mixture of entrepreneurship, taking companies to a successful exit, and also in the gaming industry, I stayed, for more than 12 years in the industry, saw it grow, especially in the online gaming industry. And it's kind of AI and gaming are two things that I am an expert on, and it's two exciting industries. And I think as AI is growing, I think it's getting more and more interesting and seeing the cross applications in both.
Yeah, and not only are you an expert in those two fields, but you're also fun fact, you're also the first Maltese ever who have participated and finished the Swedish classical ski race Vasaloppet. Who have followed you. Congratulations on that.
Thank you.
So, Angelo, when most people think about AI these days, I think they think about kind of Elon Musk's vision of self-driving cars and kind of talking robots and, and things like that. But what does AI mean to you?
Yeah, I mean, AI is obviously has been hyped up a lot. To me, it is a computer system that can learn from its experiences, that can learn by analyzing data, by looking at different examples, and being able to use what it has learned to improve and change its behavior. I think that is the core essence of what AI is all about having a computer that can learn and adapt its behavior. I think that's the shortest summary I can come up with.
Yeah, and it's interesting what you're saying, that the kind of the misconceptions of the general public and things like that. So, if I understand it correctly, there's been this expression in the AI world with AI winters and AI summers, where
Yes,
right now we are in an AI summer, right? Where it's very hyped and
indeed,
it's on
indeed.
everyone's lips. You know, everyone is talking about it and things. Can you talk about a little bit what are the misconceptions about AI and the public's perception and such?
Of course. Of course. I mean, everyone in the beginning used to think that I'm creating some version of Terminator. And I think it is very easy to overestimate what the AI capabilities are. So currently, when you look at it, the different AI solutions are very narrow, very specific. They just concentrate on one particular subject. They do it very well, but they cannot really adapt to something that is outside of what you've trained them on. So if I'm training something, for example, in gaming, that spots, like a player that is behaving in an abnormal way, I cannot take that same model and start, giving the players bonuses using that same model. I have to train a separate model for that. So I need to have many different systems that are trained on one specific application and blend them together. And that shows the limitations of current AI, which is based on something called deep learning. And deep learning requires a lot of data, a lot of training examples. You train it, and then it starts doing its own thing, adapting, and giving you useful results. However, if you try to take one system and put it in another, for example, I don't know, if I take the system for a self-driving car and try to run a gaming site with it, it's not gonna work. So most people think about AI as something that is very intelligent, that can be applied to everything, but that's not the case. And unfortunately, we're seeing this also in this current COVID-19 pandemic, that, I wish we had an AI that could create the vaccine for us, but unfortunately it doesn't exist yet. So, and this leads to what you mentioned about the AI winters and AI summers. Effectively, a lot of this deep learning, the techniques, the algorithms, the processes behind this have been around since the late 90s. But the computer hardware required to do this was not there yet. So a lot of things just could not be done with least hardware that there was. Now the computing hardware and also processing and also amount of data available has increased to the point where AI, all of a sudden, these algorithms became useful. And this is why we are currently in a summer. Also, there is a bit of a risk that the hype will lead to people kind of losing confidence in what AI can do. But I do not think that there will be an AI winter anytime soon, because we're getting good results and it's here to stay.
Yeah, and for example, the most obvious example is self-driving cars, I think, which is something that we hear kind of all the time, and I think there's some. Is it true that it's a bit of a misconception that we are just around the corner from a true self-driving car? But what would you say? What would be your estimation? When can we just push a button on a car and it will take us from home to 2 hour driving to the next town and park it wherever it wants?
Well, I mean, some capabilities, some car manufacturers already do have quite advanced systems when it comes to highway driving. For example, in Sweden, I had tested an automated car for like 600 kilometers almost of driving, and it worked pretty well. When it came to, for example, a snow surface, which was a bit strange because I was testing it in Sweden, the car didn't work at all. So you could see that the AI was struggling when it came to, for example, white surfaces because of snow, because of reflection, also like skidding a little bit, something that a human wouldn't do. But I think these are problems that will eventually be overcome. I don't think that fully self-driving cars in all situations are around the corner. I think it's going to take quite a number of years to get there. But something that can take you in, like if it's used on nice roads, maybe not on country roads, but on nice roads, I think will be possible. And we can already see that. I mean, there are a number of manufacturers that can do this. Also, what is exciting would be the ability to just go out for dinner or something when we can go out, and the car will be able to park itself. And even the car parks of the future can change, because you can just block cars together, and then the automated cars can just figure out how to get out when their owner just calls them, and they can just go and pick you up. It will be like valet parking, but automated. So I think in the next, though it's safe to assume that in the next 5-year period, I think we'll have a very good mix of automated and manually driving cars.
Because it seems that if I understand it correctly, the major challenge here is kind of AI implementation into the real world. And what I mean by that is like when we involve like the human element, because humans are unpredictable and illogical. Like how and we use our intuition based on billions of years of evolution to understand what humans are about to do. I think that is where. Is it true that that is kind of where the challenge lies? Like, how do you predict that a human is about to cross the road, for example?
I think that this is one of the main challenges, in fact, in predictability, both in pedestrians and other objects that are on the street. And you may be surprised how many exceptions there are. I mean, there may be animals on the street, things lying around, things flying around also, or just moving around. So you have to take all that into consideration, and also the behavior of the drivers themselves. So if you've trained it in California, possibly that driver behavior may not translate to driving in Malta, for example.
Exactly.
If you've got
And I guess
someone,
that yeah, I guess that is if AI wants to follow the law, it won't get that far in Malta, I guess.
maybe, so if you have someone who all of a sudden goes a little bit out of lane and effectively is temporarily for like a brief moment is in reality on a head-on collision path with you, I mean, in Malta, I wouldn't panic, for example, that much because that's you're kind of used to that and you predict the behavior of the other driver and that's fine. But you may have the AI system brake hard. And you actually can see this even in this like predictive braking systems. Testing that in Malta, sometimes the systems, if they're set to too much safety, they can overreact. And that could lead to an accident because someone will just bump into you. Yeah, I think overall the safety will increase, but also maybe driver behavior. As with anything else, I think people will also adapt to the new reality of self-driving cars. And I think the advantages, the comforts are worth the adaptation. So I think people will also learn how to behave around self-driving cars.
Yeah, I would hope so. It's what I'm getting at here a little bit is the AI implementation in the real world seems to be, quite quite, let's say, far off for us to live side by side with AI. But on the other hand, AI kind of in digital worlds and digital sphere where you can kind of when you can create situation based on data, where you can that is kind of a lot more implementable when it comes to AI, right? If I understand.
I think so, and one of the main problems is this issue of having too much data. Hopefully, new AI technologies will come along that will require less data to be collected, and also to have the AI system adapt to new situations that it hasn't seen before. For example, if you have a diversion or if you're going through a new road construction where things are changing all the time, and that is something that the AI may not be aware of, and it needs to adapt instantly on the fly.
Mm.
And maybe, yeah, but I think this is something that the AI will get better and better at. So that's why I kind of had the 5-year time frame. But I think we are there. Maybe we'll not ever have 100% driverless modes apart from, for example, in restricted parts. But I think that will still be useful if it can drive you on highway situations or main urban roads and deliver you roughly to where you need to go, and then maybe you drive it to the last few bits, that still could be pretty useful. So I think that there are levels of usefulness which the AI will address.
Yeah, yes, that's absolutely true. I mean, if you're Swedish, I think you'll have some exciting years ahead. But perhaps here in Malta, with our unpredictable nature and trafficated roads and suburban roads, maybe we'll have to wait a bit longer, basically.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
Although these roads that are being constructed are actually more amenable to that. So I think it's actually getting better.
okay, great. So if we move into the digital side then of this technology, what would you say at the moment are the most exciting and impressive functionalities using AI?
I think that the some of the stuff that is very impressive is mostly when you automate certain processes that are being done by people. For example, in recognizing hand-filled forms and also recognizing behavior and changing it in gaming. For example, being able to assign and categorize players correctly, and being able to also see the gameplay, whether it is exciting or not, because you have this concept called volatility, in which you kind of try to make a model that is not too predictable by people, but at the same time exciting. But you need to keep a balance, because if it is too unpredictable, you can frustrate players. If you make it too predictable, it can be boring. So you need to match that. And I think this is one thing where AI can really improve the models. And also if you look at different branches, for example, in esports, you can have also AI agents that are more and more intelligent and that can give you a better run, for your money and time, basically. And also when it comes to customer support, for example, I think this is where AI is still in its infancy, but I think can improve a lot. So yeah, I think also when it comes to fraud detection and this kind of stuff, related stuff, I think that is for one of the most impressive applications of AI because it can detect it quite well, possibly better than a human. And that's are the gaming applications, obviously.
Yeah. What would is there any? So you mentioned a few there, and I know that, for example, customer support, there is already tools now that are in use by some of the major operators, but there's still obviously work to be done by them. What would you say are the most impressive kind of system or usage of AI right now that is already in place, so to say?
I think when it comes to when it comes to fraud checks, when it comes to KYC checks, your customer check, I think those are very good applications that are in use. I think also when it comes to the gameplay to optimize the game design, I think that is also some. I know that some manufacturers are using this, and this leads to better games, basically better quality games. So I think this is something where you can really ace it, and also making sure that you don't end up with bugs in the implementation, making sure that you don't lose money. Um, uh, I also think when it comes to responsible gaming, detecting, for example, when a player is showing abnormal behavior that should be controlled or maybe like stopped a little bit or like cooled down a little bit. I think this is also a very good application that is already using AI, and I know that a fair percentage of operators are also using this or thinking of using this.
Yeah, that's obviously great, and compliance is on everyone's mind right now, and it's costing the organization a huge amount of both resources and money to stay compliant in these days. And I would imagine that landscape will only get more difficult to navigate as we go forward and more markets becomes regulated, right? So these type of
Definitely.
these type of systems would obviously be extremely important for the industry to have. So would you say that right now that is it is infancy, or would you say that it's already mature, so to say, the tools that exist?
I think that it is still in the infancy. I think that maybe it's not like completely the early days. For example, I was one of the first people to start using AI in the gaming industry. Back then, there was absolutely almost nothing in existence. I think bit by bit, there are more companies using it. So I do think that, roughly for the last 6, 7 years or so, I think AI has made inroads and machine learning techniques into the gaming industry. And as usual, the gaming industry tends to be one of the main, first innovators to take up new technology. So that's quite interesting to see. And so some people do have like very mature BI warehouses, and the business intelligence warehouses are perfect sources of information for the AI system to learn. Um, so I do think that in some areas, for example, as you mentioned, compliance, the AI solutions are more mature, and it's obvious because it is one of the ways that it's an overhead, it's an expense, and the AI solution can really cut down on the overhead. And other solutions when it comes to maybe like virtual or real-time customer player assistance, I think it is less mature, but I think we'll see more and more of that. I mean, my vision of where AI will go in the gaming industry is literally like having a VIP service for each and every player, and being able to afford to give that kind of service to each and every player, because you cannot really do it with people, because you need to employ basically like a person for every player almost. But the AI will enable you to do that.
Okay, so so I've seen some examples of this. I know BetConstruct have launched a service called Huri. I remember they presented this as iGaming Next last year. But would you say that these type of solutions that exist right now, is kind of a starting point, but they have a long way to go to become, let's say, more than just a first point of contact, let's say. Is that true, or?
I think so. I mean, as with anything new, the technology needs to mature. I think the technology is mature enough to be deployed live with your, on actual players, not just in a test environment. And I think this will drive the learning process. So my advice would be to always have some kind of indicator that maybe the AI system is not coping well, so you don't frustrate the player and have a human actually intervene. And again, this ties in with my own personal philosophy that AI should always be assisting people rather than replacing them. It should be a tool that we use in order to optimize, to get better performance, but there should always people in control and being helped in doing their task, their goal more properly. I do think that the solutions on the market, there's a lot of room for improvement, but I think this is also tied down with the AI technology itself. I think that as newer technology eventually gets created that can adapt better, the technologies that are in use will also adapt as a natural consequence.
So this is what you're touching on, is what is called XAI, right? Which is that it can be administrated, and it's predictable rather than, or you can explain what is happening behind the scenes rather than,
Yes.
I don't know if it's correct to say traditional AIs or deep learning techniques are like impossible to predict. Is that what you are touching on as well? That you kind of.
This is also yes, because current systems can only give you an answer, but they do not explain how they actually
How?
got to the answer.
And the XAI is a system so that where a human can explain what is happening, basically, or why it came to that conclusion, right?
Yeah, where a human can understand how the AI system got to that answer, basically. And I think this interaction will be more and more increasingly important. I mean, so far, there hasn't been a solution, a perfect solution for this yet. So I'm hoping, that we'll be seeing this class of solutions in the next months or years coming out that will actually explain themselves to you.
Okay. So XAI right now is just a concept, then you would say, or that people are trying to solve, or?
People are trying to solve it, but I think so far it's still an unsolved problem.
Yeah. Okay. So let's take a step back from this and explain this a little bit. Like, can you explain, like, why is it that we can't, like, a human expert cannot explain why an AI system can tell a horse from a cat, for example? Why is that?
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good one. Okay. So basically, yeah, to tell, for example, from a horse and a cat, you're gonna feed the system a lot of pictures of horses, saying this is a horse, this is a cat, this is a horse, this is a cat. An actual example was, in fact, between a husky and a dog. This was an actual example that I think Microsoft had a classifier, and the system started performing well after a while. But it turned out that what it was looking wasn't actually at the husky or the dog face itself. It was looking for the presence of snow in the background and determining, okay, this is a husky, this is a dog. But I mean, if the system cannot explain itself, you would never guess. And you'd think, okay, this is working well. Then you'll give it a picture of a husky on a sandy beach, and it will not work because it will think it's a dog. So the same thing applies. Imagine if you have a system that says, okay, this is a VIP player, but it cannot tell you why. Would we trust such a system? So this leads to also the issues of trustworthiness. And in fact, the OECD have recently released guidelines for how AI should behave in the future. And this is one of them. One of the main points is that AI should be trustworthy. It needs to earn the trust. And I think this is something where I had a few events which I spoke about this, about human abdication to AI. This is where we need to ensure that we do not overtrust AI systems, just because one of the main reasons they cannot so far actually understand what they are doing. So, the AI system is telling the difference between a picture between a cat and a horse, but it does not actually know what a horse is. It knows that this collection of pixels of images are an object that is called horse, but you don't actually know, it doesn't really know what a horse is. So this is, I think, one of the things that is also unsolved in AI, and I think that will be improved in the near future.
Okay, so basically the AI tools, like we cannot explain how the AI comes to this conclusion because the systems are so complex, and like the neural networks are so complex, so that it's just impossible to explain why they just somehow through a lot of data and a lot of generations they just manage to tell these pixels and say what they are. So if you want to be able to have a system that you can understand how it works, like the XAI, like what you're talking about, would you have to sacrifice performance in that case?
So hopefully the solutions that will come out will not need to sacrifice performance, or maybe they'll be slightly slower. But the advantage of having an explanation is obviously outweighing the disadvantages of maybe slightly slower performance. So this is something that I think will be important, and effectively the term that is used is called black box, because if you have a very complicated system, and most AI systems that are useful are in fact very complicated, they kind of go from the input, go from one thing that they are analyzing and give you an answer, but you don't know how they, what they've done, and it's so complicated that, as you said, you cannot really tell what they are doing. So you kind of have to take their word for it, but you shouldn't, because I don't think that AI systems are that advanced yet. And we have seen that automated systems have led to a number of, accidents sometimes and unreliability. And I don't think that they're at that point where we can really trust them to that point to just take their word for it.
And I guess especially if we take this into iGaming, especially when it comes to compliance and these type of things, then for an organization to completely rely on their compliance side to an AI, they absolutely have to have a lot of confidence in that system, right? So what you're saying, So what you're saying is there are already a lot of examples of AI being able to correctly predict, the husky, for example, but for the wrong reason. Let's say.
Exactly. And this is very important, because if you decide not to look at a particular case and say, okay, this is not fraud, but it turns out to be, and you cannot explain how you did that unless there's some process of manual review of the AI system's decision. So far, we still have to do that. Operators still have to review and check what the AI system can do. They cannot just let the AI run the whole business, because it's just not there yet.
Yeah, exactly. They have to they have to check up on the decisions to see that they are staying on track. It's a time saver for now, let's say, but it's not a system that can be that you want to rely on completely. Is that correct?
Yeah. And my view is that maybe it will never be 100% something that can replace someone. And I think this is the viewpoint, because most people tend to hype it up and think that it's something that will replace people. I think this is the wrong terminology that even some consultants and, companies that are in this space try to use. I don't agree with that. I feel that the AI should save money, should cut down on costs as much as possible, but there should always be that human touch, that human oversight that enables things to be done that the AI maybe cannot foresee. And this is where people are so good at adapting to new situations and being flexible, yet knowing the rules and making sure that everything is done in a human way.
Yeah, and do you think that an AI will ever have the same intuition as a human being has, considering that we have gone through billions of years of evolution to get that intuition? Is that something you think that we can create?
Yes, I often get asked this.
Yeah.
I get this asked many times. And I do think that what you're referring to would be like sort of artificial general intelligence.
Yeah, AGI.
Um, I do think that at some point it will be invented. Whether though it will be, I don't think that. I'm pretty sure that no one has anywhere close to a solution to it, and so I don't think that we'll have anything like that in the next 10 years or so. Um, I do hope that we'll see it in our lifetime. Some people think that it may be even 100 years from now. I'm not that pessimistic myself, but that is my personal opinion. Some people think that it may never be done. I don't think so. I do think that it will happen at some point, and I'm just hoping that it will be within our lifetime. I think that is my best guess at
Okay,
that.
interesting.
Uh,
So what like safety wise, if you create an AGI like the artificial general intelligence, are you on like Elon Musk's side where you think that this is like Pandora's box and the world is going to go under, or do you think that human beings will be able to control this system?
I think it largely depends on who creates it and their mindset. Um, so if you create such a system with safety in mind from day one, I think that all the Musk scenarios, I think, may be a little bit over exaggerated. But where he is not exaggerated is that if you just blindly create this without thinking about safety, I think you can end up in some versions of those like nightmarish scenarios. I mean, I do hope that people who are close to getting there, when they get there, will take safety into consideration. Um, uh, but yeah, and the ability to actually take control of those systems when they exist.
Yeah, we can hope. I mean, the human beings haven't had the greatest track record in keeping powerful technologies under check, perhaps. But um,
In,
m-
in fact,
yeah,
one of my friends and advisors, Noel Sharkey, has been always advocating against the weaponization of AI. And this is where I think there should be a line drawn because that is where AI can really cause harm. And I don't think that it is an issue for the gaming industry, but it is maybe an issue for society
yeah,
at
yeah, yeah.
large.
Yeah, we are sliding a bit off topic. So I want to ask you as well, Angelo, on the so other industries like let's take an organization like Netflix, for example. Netflix are very good at predicting what type of shows you will want to watch based on your history of watching shows, of course. And not only that, but also, what kind of image to present to you to make this show look the most attractive. And, the systems are very advanced in that regard. Um, and similarly in the iGaming industry, perhaps there is a similar use to that, which is kind of like what games to be recommended based on your history of playing games and kind of how to present them. And not only that, but also for the gaming suppliers, the based on how you interact with the games, how to kind of know what the players like and don't like and stuff. What would you say? Are those systems exist now? Are they relevant? What would you say are some good implementations in that regard?
Oh yes, I think myself, I mean, we had done a recommendation system. I think more than 7 years ago. That was already in use, and as time went by, I could see that people were not really playing that much on their mobiles back then, and then mobiles started becoming more and more popular. I mean, the last really 5 years or so, as a means of delivering games to people, and now I think a lot of operators are just mobile first, which was a concept that didn't exist, say, 10 years ago. So, this is something that I think on a small screen, you do have to take this into account even more because you can only recommend only a certain number of slots. Only a certain number of games to the player. So you have to make sure that you're recommending relevant stuff. And the way that it works is very similar to the way Netflix or Amazon work, basically seeing what is the propensity of the player, what type of games they like, what types of action kind of they like, also whether they like predictable games or not, the risk level of the player, and also seeing what other players have played after they played a particular game. So in a way, all these techniques, I think all the successful operators in the history are all using some form of recommendation system already. And I think those that don't, I would be very surprised to see how they are actually successful, because it is very difficult to compete otherwise, unless you have an army of people that are curating it for particular player segments. And that can be done. And in some cases, you can obviously get even better recommendations, but it is an expensive way to do it. So maybe for the very top VIP players, you can manually curate content. But I think for the general average player, the recommendation systems do a very good job, as you've seen, with Netflix and others that do this on a very good way.
Interesting. And on the game supplier side as well, is that something that are you aware that they are kind of using AI systems to understand how players interact with the games?
I think, yeah, game suppliers obviously do have a lot of data on the player behavior, and I think this is used to also improve the game mechanics, to improve the game user experience. Obviously, being a regulated industry, you cannot just change the game, every day. You have to still pass the certification. So there are restrictions on how you can update a game, but this is something that you can get there. There is less control from the game suppliers because the operators generally control the user interface and the user experience that is presented to the players. So when recommending a game, it's more like a commercial thing in order to influence a supplier to put your game rather than someone else, on the operator's main page, for example, or main screen. So this is not something that I think suppliers can influence directly. It's more indirect. But I think that AI is more useful to understand the player behavior, to understand the touch points when players are more interested or not, and also understand what is making a game perform better, what makes it more exciting, and all these factors basically.
It seems that the more we move into like the world of big data, the less we rely on our intuition and creativity. It's becoming more data driven, both in terms of what you just said, but in marketing and other areas as well. Do you think that kind of this era of humans kind of taking, shooting from the hip type of thing, is that over?
Well, yeah, I mean, it is a fair point, and I do think that as time goes by, there is more and more data-driven decisions being created, and this is changing the way that people behave, changing also the way that startups plan for these things. So it is a change. I do think that creativity, though, is not going to go anywhere. I mean, you still need to be creative, to create things like nice background sound, the visual effects, the overall design. I think that is something that will be much more difficult for AI to ever replace. I mean, as you know, one of my sides projects that I do is about AI and creativity. But I don't think that the stuff that the AI creates is yet ready for the prime time to have polished games. I think though we will see some things, for example, in the generation of maybe like customized interfaces, customized symbols in the games. I think we'll start seeing AI making inroads into that. There are also some AI that is used to customize the background music when it loops, so it doesn't sound exactly the same. It kind of varies it a little bit. But it's one thing to vary something that a person has composed and another to actually compose it from scratch yourself. So I think that we will need the creativity and the flair to do something nice still.
Because even on that side, there are some like incredible systems now, right? Which like you feed it kind of you tell the system like sea, rocks, sky or something, and it will just paint you an amazing picture, for example, right? This is something.
Yeah.
So even on that side, I mean, advancements on that note. I mean, it like you don't have to have a graphics designer necessarily soon. You can just tell the system what to Or am I wrong?
Yeah, I don't think that graphic designers need to worry
Okay.
about their job yet.
Okay.
Um, uh, but I think that yeah, some basic stuff. Yeah, I can see that AI can customize games and provide a level of personalization that would be impossible to offer.
Mm,
So I can see that. Or for example, the possibility of seeing of inserting yourself, for example, in the game, personalizing some of the in-game content and all that stuff. I think that is something that will become increasingly more common.
okay.
And yeah, even this pandemic stuff, lockdowns and video calls, I think have highlighted starkly the pros and the cons of remote work and also of the online experience. Because I do think that the interfaces need to be improved and certain things you realize are missing from the online experience, and I think it has made it highlighted it more. Many operators are aware of this, of course, but I think it has highlighted it more to a general cross section of the public.
Yeah, true. So we have a question here actually from Jesmond Spiteri, who's asking, how is AI integrated in IoT, in Internet of Things?
Mm. I mean, normally IoT is more applicable, obviously, to like physical operators rather than online. So, for example, you do get applications in gaming and IoT when it comes to sensors on machines, when it comes to sensors on games that are checking, for example, cameras, sensors, and you're using that to transfer, for example, performance data to also be able to do checks that there is no tampering, for example. Also, you can use IoT devices to monitor in a physical space the movement of people around different games. So you do like things like video analytics and analyze that. So in a way, IoT is kind of making the real world appear more digital to the AI system. It's a way of the AI system learning about the physical world.
Interesting. Thank you, Desmond, for that question. As always, we're running out of time. It's crazy how the time flies every time we do these things. But Angelo, is there anything on the horizon that the iGaming industry should be aware of now? You think it could be, virtual reality and how that integrates with AI, or is there any other things we should look out for at the moment?
I think, in fact, that the current experiences are going to drive the development of more virtual reality environments that work better. I think even the interfaces, consumer interfaces, are going to improve as a result because of more people working from home and needing a better experience. And so I think that is going to have a positive effect. I also think that in gaming, one of the most exciting is esports. I think that digital sports is going to be possibly the next big thing that is going to drive a new generation of people. And I think it will, and as we have seen currently, like at the moment, real sports have stopped completely, which is a big problem, which I think with esports you will never have that kind of problem. So I think that is something that I see on the horizon, the esports and better devices for virtual reality.
Yeah, there's numbers coming out now, right? There's a huge amount of people who are following esports, like much more than I think what the general public understands. Something in excess of like 1 billion people or something like this is now actively following esports, and this is obviously the younger generation that comes up. Do you think that? Do you think so? I've been thinking about esports too in general, and I come from that world. From when I was younger. Um, do you think that it is a thing that will grow with the younger generation, or do you think that you can teach the older generation that didn't grow up with esports how to enjoy esports and watch esports?
I think so. I think that some games may not appeal to older players, especially those that have not been, been playing games since they were young. Um, I do think that, yeah, that not all the esports will appeal to everyone, but I think that some will. So I think that the both the operators who are, providing services on top of the sports will need to kind of find the right recommendations, and AI will help there to recommend the right games to the right type of players. But also, I think the esports manufacturers themselves, the game designers themselves, I think will figure out ways of making the games more appealing. And this is why I think it's still the start of an exciting journey. I do think that there will be a blend of esports and gaming as we know it to make it more enhanced. And you can see it even in traditional live player sports. The graphics and visualizations that you see during the game are becoming more and more similar to what video games do. So I think that there will be an effective merge of the two things. And we'll also see new things coming up, like for example, the Formula E was something that didn't exist before. You could see, for example, the drone races, for example, maybe something exciting that don't exist yet. And yeah, I'm sure that we'll find new, I don't know, like MMA robot against machine, robot against human, for example. I mean, you see it in science fiction right now, but I do think that in the future we will actually have those kind of things that we see in films happening in reality.
Bring back Robot Wars. That's what I want to see.
Yeah,
I would bet
yeah,
every single time if I could bet on Robot Wars, the classic UK show. Do you remember that? Did you see that as well?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Chaos 2. That was the best one. Okay, very last question for today, Angelo. Amit Sam is she missed the beginning of the podcast. I recommend to go back and watch it in the beginning. Some super interesting. But she's asking: is there currently any slot games that have AI integrated, or will we see this in the future? So we touched on this a little bit before, but can you point to any game specifically that has like AI integrated, or is it all? Let's say.
I don't think that there is anything that is currently using AI to a very advanced level. And this could also be due to regulations because some of the adaptation features that AI can produce may not be completely compatible with regulation at the moment because you need to certify the games every time you change them. So I do think that this will change as more AI starts being involved. I think AI is more used in the design of the games. But this is something that tends to be kept proprietary by the game manufacturer because they do not want you to know that they're using it. I do think that this will be though a trend in the future to make it more attractive, to personalize it further, to personalize it in a way that you cannot do with a person, basically.
Yeah, interesting. So I want my own personalized dragon in the future game.
Yeah,
That would entice me.
that really takes you a
Yes,
little bit,
yeah, they're exchanging coins and things.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah.
Angelo, this has been incredibly interesting. The future is something I think we cannot even comprehend yet what is going to come out of this. And already now there is some very interesting things happening. I mean, look, just like we talked about before, the fact that I think it's a true statistic now that AI systems are better at telling cats from dogs than humans are in pictures. Is that correct? Yeah.
Um, uh, and more usefully, when it comes to things like MRI scans, they can detect certain conditions better than people
Yeah.
can on average, and they don't tire. So yeah, I think this is an area where AI will lead to useful results, and I think that the more useful applications that we get, I think the more that will work hand in hand together alongside the systems.
Yeah, great. So to summarize everything, is basically is in some ways the AI systems are incredibly advanced and way ahead of human capabilities. But in others, where we think AI will perform well, they don't perform well at all. So it's a mix of good optimism for the future, but also cautiously optimism, and we probably won't see any Terminators running around for quite some time.
I hope if I have nothing to do with it, they will never appear.
They will never exactly. How do you know that I am not an AI? That's the question. All right, Angelo. This has been great. Let's do this soon again. I can talk about this for hours. I feel like, and it's very interesting stuff. So I'd like to thank you for coming on board today, and thank you also to everyone who tuned in. And I wish you all a great rest of the day. And Angelo, take care as well. And I see you on the running track soon, I hope.
Thank you.
Thank you.